It all kicked off at 6:42 a.m. on a Sunday. I remember the time exactly because I was sipping my first cup of coffee, watching the sunrise from my porch, when the clang of the HOA-issued mailbox lids snapped shut like a judge's gavel. Taped to the front was a bright orange notice. Noise violation, excessive construction activity during quiet hours, it said in bold. Issued by Veronica Dales, HOA Vice President, Construction, at 6 a.m. I hadn't even sneezed yet, let alone fired up any tools. I live alone, no kids, no parties. My name's Warren Abner, retired firefighter. I moved to this quiet cul-de-sac hoping for peace, but instead I got Veronica. Mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, permanent scowl, and a clipboard surgically attached to her hand. She was the type who thought her power in the HOA was second only to the mayor's, maybe even God's. I walked over to her house 2 doors down, where she was already pruning her roses with the intensity of a bomb technician. "Veronica," I called, "what's this noise complaint about?" She didn't even look up. "You were hammering or using some kind of power tool before 7. That's a violation." HOA rules are clear. I wasn't doing anything. I've been on the porch the whole time. She turned and forced a grin so tight it looked like it hurt. "Well, I heard it, and a neighbor confirmed," who she shrugged. "Anonymous, but credible." I stared at her. She knew I wouldn't be able to prove a negative. Most folks would have just paid the fine and moved on. But Veronica didn't know who she was messing with. See, when you've spent 20 years in fire investigations, you get used to documenting everything. I had 12 security cameras around my property. Full audio, motion triggered, date stamped. And I had the footage from this morning saved to 3 different drives before she finished her roses. Back inside, I pulled it up, between 5 o'clock a.m. and 7 o'clock a.m. The only sounds were birds, a distant lawn sprinkler, and me sighing over a crossword. No hammering, no sawing, no construction. But here's the kicker: I spotted something else. Exactly 6:28 a.m. Veronica herself crept down the sidewalk in her fuzzy slippers, holding what looked like a phone and a Bluetooth speaker. She stopped just outside my property line, pressed something on her screen, and a faint noise came through my mic feed. Drills. Hammers. The kind you'd find in a home renovation video. She stood there for 2 minutes, played the sound, then walked off. Didn't even look around. I sat back in my chair and let out a low whistle. She had faked the noise to issue a violation. And she didn't know I had her on camera, every angle, every second. I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was going to expose her whole game. I didn't waste a second. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting in front of a small monitor in my garage, reviewing the footage again, this time with my neighbor, Carlos. He lived across the street, a mechanic with a knack for electronics and an instinct for spotting patterns. We'd bonded over restoring an old Ford pickup last fall, and he'd always had a nose for trouble. "Look at the timestamp," I said, pointing to the screen. She walks up, hits play on something, and stands there like she's waiting for applause. Carlos leaned in. "That's not just any speaker, that's a Sonos Roam, expensive little thing for faking a violation." I nodded, and she thought no one would notice. "She's done this before," Carlos said. "I guarantee it." That set something off in me. I started digging. Not with rumors or gossip, I wanted paper. HOA meeting notes, archived newsletters, fine notices. Anything with Veronica's signature on it. I reached out to a friend at the city clerk's office. She owed me a favor from years back when I helped rescue her dog from a storm drain on Christmas Eve. She got me access to publicly filed HOA documents. Over the next 2 days, I put together a spreadsheet. 37 separate complaints filed in the past year, all between 6 and 8 a.m. 22 of those were noise violations. Every single one signed off by Veronica, and most were against homeowners either new to the neighborhood or who disagreed with her at HOA meetings. Patterns so clear even a blind man could see them, but here's where it got darker. One of the homeowners on that list, Mrs. Patel, had paid nearly $2,000 in fines over 6 months. When I called her, she sounded hesitant but eventually said, "I didn't have the energy to fight. My husband passed last year. I just wanted them to leave me alone." I felt my jaw tighten. I made copies of the footage, printed the spreadsheet, and added testimony from 3 neighbors who'd been fined under similar circumstances. Carlos helped me rig a simple voice amplifier and mic system to play the audio for a group. By Friday evening, I had a plan. I called a special neighborhood meeting. HOA bylaws allowed any homeowner to request one with a minimum of 10 signatures. I got 23. We gathered at dusk on the common lawn behind the tennis courts. I set up a projector, Carlos brought speakers, and folks brought chairs and coolers like it was movie night. Veronica arrived 10 minutes late, holding her clipboard like a shield. Her expression froze when she saw me standing at the front, laptop in hand. "Warren, this is highly irregular," she said. "You didn't coordinate this with the board." "Nope," I answered, plugging in the projector. "Didn't have to. Section 4, Article 6, homeowner quorum." Whispers passed through the crowd. People were curious now. Veronica folded her arms. "Well, I hope this isn't a waste of time." I clicked play. The footage rolled, audio clear as day, her slippers, her phone. The fake construction sounds, gasps rippled through the group like wind through dry grass. I said nothing. Just let it play. Then I pulled up the spreadsheet and showed the patterns. Names, dates, times, fines. I played a short recording of Mrs. Patel's statement with her permission. Veronica's face had gone pale. Her mouth opened, then closed. "You deny this?" I asked. Her voice was tight. "This is taken out of context. Would you like to explain the context of sneaking around with a Bluetooth speaker to fake a violation?" She didn't answer. Carlos stepped forward. "We've been looking through the HOA budget too. You signed off on over $5,000 in investigative services in the last fiscal year. Care to tell us where that money went?" Veronica's eyes darted. "That's confidential." "No, ma'am," I said. "Not when it's our dues paying for it." The crowd started murmuring louder. Someone muttered, "I knew something was fishy." Then came the moment she really lost control. A woman in the back raised her hand and said, "My husband was fined for a party we never had. We were out of town." "Veronica, did you fake that too?" Veronica tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "This is all a distraction. Warren is trying to create chaos." I raised my hand. "Then let's settle it properly." I pulled out a written petition and handed out pens. "We're voting to suspend Veronica Dales from all HOA duties pending an independent audit conducted by a third-party firm. And we're filing a formal complaint with the County Housing Board. If there's no wrongdoing, she'll be reinstated. If there is, we'll press charges." That was the final blow. By the end of the night, 32 households had signed, enough to trigger the vote. The next morning, I filed the report with the County Housing Oversight Office, along with all the evidence. They didn't take long to respond. By Wednesday, Veronica received an official cease and desist order, barring her from issuing any further citations or accessing HOA funds. She tried to push back by claiming the footage was fabricated, but the tech examiner from the county verified the timestamp metadata and confirmed everything was authentic. The audit team arrived within the week. 2 men and a woman in gray suits, polite but all business. They requested access to HOA financials, emails, and meeting records. Veronica refused, tried to lock the files in her home office. That was a mistake. The auditors returned with a court order backed by the sheriff's department. A deputy arrived with them and executed a warrant to retrieve the HOA's digital records. The neighborhood watched from their porches as Veronica stood on her front lawn in disbelief, arms crossed, while the deputy disappeared inside. I stayed quiet through the whole thing. The auditors didn't just find the fake fines. They found kickbacks payments from a bogus compliance contractor registered under a shell company in her cousin's name. Thousands of dollars funneled from HOA dues into personal accounts. The county pressed charges within 2 weeks: fraud, misuse of HOA funds, falsifying official documents. A felony list long enough to read like a menu. She was arrested quietly early one morning, escorted out by 2 plainclothes officers. No cuffs, no drama, but the neighborhood knew. People nodded to each other that day in solidarity. We held a new board election the next month. Carlos ran for treasurer. He won unanimously. I didn't run for anything. I'd had my hands full enough, but they asked me to be the informal compliance advisor going forward. I agreed on one condition. Every citation had to come with time-stamped evidence and be reviewed by 2 unrelated board members. That passed without a single objection. Veronica's house went up for sale a few months later. No one bothered her during the packing. We were better than that. But I did notice one thing before she left. She'd taken down all her cameras, every single one. I guess she didn't like the feeling of being watched after all. The neighborhood felt different after Veronica left. Lighter. People lingered outside longer, waved more often, even started organizing weekend potlucks on the Greenbelt. For the first time in years, the HOA board meetings didn't feel like court trials. They felt like neighbors actually solving problems together. But just when we thought we'd rooted out the worst of it, something surfaced that made everything before look like small potatoes. Carlos called me one afternoon, voice unusually sharp. "Warren, you got a minute? I need to show you something." I walked over to his place. He already had his laptop open, a half-finished sandwich pushed aside on the table. "Remember those fake invoices the auditors found?" he asked. "The ones from the made-up contractor," I nodded. "Yeah, Veronica's cousin's shell company. Well, I ran that LLC through a reverse address search. It's registered to a P.O. box in town, but the contact number, it's connected to a burner cell. I pulled the metadata from one of the scanned invoices. Something was off." He turned the screen toward me. The PDF was created using HOA letterhead, but the embedded file properties list the author as H. Dalton, I frowned. "Who's that?" "Howard Dalton," Carlos said. "Our former HOA president, the guy who moved to Arizona last year. Remember him?" I did. Howard had always acted like he was doing everyone a favor just by showing up to meetings. He left abruptly last fall after announcing he was downsizing. No one had looked too hard into it. Carlos leaned in. "I think Veronica didn't start this. I think she inherited it." I sat down slowly. "You're saying the fraud started before her?" "Exactly, and it gets worse." I pulled the bank routing info from one of the payments to the contractor. It doesn't go to Arizona. It goes through an intermediary account registered in Nevada, then gets routed offshore. I let out a low breath. "This isn't just HOA embezzlement. This is money laundering." Carlos nodded grimly. "I already called the county auditor. They're flagging it up the chain, said it's likely going federal." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how deep this thing might go. How many people got fined, threatened, or pushed around just so someone could skim a little extra under the radar. 2 days later, federal agents showed up with a search warrant. They didn't knock politely like the auditors had. They moved quick, securing the HOA's storage unit and the old filing cabinets in the community center. They took both desktop computers from the board's tiny office, plus all backup drives. Carlos and I stayed out of their way, but one of the agents, a woman in a Navy windbreaker, pulled me aside after they finished. "You're the one who uncovered the fabricated violations." I nodded. She gave a tight nod, professional but appreciative. "You may have saved a lot of people a lot of grief. This wasn't just local misconduct. We believe this HOA was used as a laundering front for at least 3 years." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. So Veronica was just a piece of it. Yes, but she played her part willingly. "She's already agreed to cooperate." I didn't say anything. I wasn't interested in what kind of deal she'd struck. I just wanted it all uncovered. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood was buzzing again, but not with fear like before, with curiosity. People wanted to know what had really been going on behind the scenes. The new board stayed transparent, issuing weekly updates about the investigation, making all meeting minutes public, opening the books to any resident who asked. Then something unexpected happened. One of the newer neighbors, a young woman named Elise who worked as a paralegal, started going through the old records. She found a clause in the HOA's formation documents that had been quietly amended without proper notice 5 years ago. The amendment gave the board unilateral authority to issue fines without homeowner votes, exactly the mechanism Veronica had abused. It was supposed to have required a 2/3 majority vote from homeowners to pass, but there was no record of such a vote. No announcement. Just a line in the minutes claiming it had passed. Elise showed it to the new board president, a retired school principal named Marjorie, who immediately called a special meeting. That night, the common lawn was full again. Lawn chairs, dogs on leashes, kids with juice boxes. But this time, it wasn't to expose a single villain. It was to fix the system that let them exist in the first place. "We've all lived under rules we never agreed to," Marjorie said. "We were told we had no choice. That's not how this is supposed to work." Carlos stepped forward. The clause was added illegally, which means every fine issued under it is invalid. Every lien based on those fines should never have happened. A murmur spread through the crowd. Elise raised her hand. "We can challenge it. If we file a class action with everyone affected, we can petition the court to void the fines and seek restitution." That was the moment it all turned. People who'd stayed quiet for years started coming forward. A man named Russell showed us how he'd been forced to refinance after the HOA threatened foreclosure over an unpaid fine. A single mother named Tanya explained how she'd been made to repaint her home twice in 1 year for non-compliance, each time costing thousands. Each story added weight to the growing file Elise was compiling. By the end of the month, over 50 residents had joined the complaint. The case was filed with the county civil court, and within weeks, a judge issued a stay on all pending fines and enforcement actions until the matter was resolved. The HOA's insurance provider got involved next. When they reviewed the claim's history and discovered the fraud, they canceled the policy outright and reported the activity to their legal division. That triggered the final domino. A city zoning official named Derek approached the board with documentation showing that Veronica and Howard had submitted falsified compliance reports to the city in order to secure grant money meant for community improvements money that was never used. That brought in the city attorney's office. Now it was no longer just about the HOA, it was about public funds. By late spring, the city had filed charges against both former board members, and the state attorney general's office opened an investigation into 5 other HOAs in the region that had used the same legal firm for their documentation. Turns out, the rot wasn't contained to our neighborhood. But unlike most places, we had something others didn't: proof. We had footage, paper trails, testimony, and a neighborhood that finally had each other's backs. The court eventually ruled in favor of the residents. Fines were reversed, liens vacated. The HOA was ordered to establish a resident-run compliance committee, with no single individual allowed to issue fines without majority approval and photographic evidence. Elise was appointed as legal advisor to the new board voluntarily. Marjorie stayed on as president. And Carlos, well, he started teaching a monthly workshop on cybersecurity and fraud prevention right out of his garage. I went back to restoring my old motorcycle. Every now and then, someone would ask me if I was surprised by how deep the corruption went. I'd always answer the same way: no. I've seen fires start from a single spark. All it takes is oxygen and time. But this time, we weren't letting it burn unchecked. We turned the hose on full blast, and we made damn sure the ashes wouldn't shelter anything rotten ever again. The first court date for the class action suit was set for mid-June. Most of the neighborhood showed up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to see the system finally work the way it should. The courthouse lobby buzzed with quiet tension as residents passed around copies of Elise's compiled evidence packet. Even the judge had commented during pre-trial proceedings that the case was one of the most thoroughly documented homeowner disputes he'd ever seen. The day before the hearing, I got a call from a contact I hadn't spoken to in years, Maya Lansing, now an assistant district attorney. Years back, I'd helped her navigate a code enforcement mess when her aunt's house was wrongly condemned. She remembered my name. "I'm handling an adjacent case," she said without preamble. "Tied to your HOA, we're preparing to file on a set of criminal charges against multiple parties. I need you to sit in on a deposition tomorrow morning. You'll be under oath." "Happy to," I said. "What's the scope?" "Wire fraud, misuse of public funds, tampering with legal records, and possibly perjury. The city's building inspection office passed us internal memos this week. Looks like there was collusion between the board and a private zoning consultant to falsify compliance reports." The line went quiet for a second. "There's also a document with your name on it," she added, "dated 2 years ago." Supposedly, you approved a budget adjustment for a landscaping project that never happened. My stomach turned. I never signed anything like that. We know, she said. The signature doesn't match your records. But we'll need your statement to confirm it's a forgery. That deposition, the next morning, was short. I showed up with a stack of my own records, emails, meeting minutes, scans of every HOA signature I'd submitted going back 5 years. The signature on the landscaping budget was a laughable imitation. They hadn't even gotten the middle initial right. Maya's team thanked me. Then she handed me a sealed envelope. Subpoena for testimony, criminal trial. You're on the list. The trial began the following month. It wasn't just Veronica and Howard anymore. 2 more names had been added: the zoning consultant, a man named Everett Lang, and the HOA's former legal advisor, Ruth Densley. Both had played key roles in the scheme, approving fraudulent permits and producing boilerplate legal memos used to silence dissenters. The courtroom was packed. Local news outlets sent reporters. A few residents from neighboring communities sat in the back rows, quietly taking notes. Testimony stretched across 3 weeks. Elise delivered hers with calm precision, walking the jury through timelines, spreadsheets, and forged documents. She never stumbled once. I was called on the 6th day. The prosecutor, a wiry woman with a voice like cold steel, asked me to describe the morning I caught Veronica with the speaker. Had you ever received a noise complaint before that day? No, I said. Not once. Did you initiate any construction that morning? I didn't even open my toolbox. She paused for effect. And what did you observe on your security footage? A person, the defendant, walking to the edge of my property, holding a smartphone and a portable speaker. She played a recording of construction noise for several minutes, then walked away. Shortly after, I received a violation notice. The defense attorney tried to dismiss it as circumstantial, claimed the video didn't prove intent. But when the prosecution played the footage for the jury, complete with synced audio and timestamp overlays, the room fell silent. There was no mistaking what had happened. It wasn't even close. The jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on all counts by the end of the 3rd week. Howard Dalton was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, with an additional 3 years of supervised release. Veronica got 4. Ruth and Everett both took plea deals for reduced sentences, but were barred from working in any legal or municipal capacity for the rest of their lives. The judge also issued a permanent injunction dissolving the HOA in its current form. In its place, a volunteer-run neighborhood advisory council was created with full transparency requirements. Budgets, votes, meeting recordings, all to be published monthly online. No fines could be issued without court approval. No changes to community rules without a supermajority vote. The class action suit wrapped up just days later. The court ordered restitution to all fined residents, plus damages equal to 50% of the original amounts. Insurance covered most of it. What remained was pulled from the seized accounts tied to the fraudulent contractor. With everything settled, the neighborhood took on a new rhythm. There was no longer a board breathing down anyone's neck. People finally felt like they lived in homes again, not under surveillance. One weekend in late August, Marjorie invited everyone to a block-wide barbecue. No agenda, no speeches, just food, music, and kids running through sprinklers. Carlos walked over with 2 folding chairs and a tray of ribs. Never thought I'd see this day, he said, setting everything down beside me. Honestly, I took a bite and leaned back. I didn't either, but I'm glad we didn't let it slide. He nodded toward a group of teens decorating the community bulletin board. You think they'll remember what happened? They won't have to, I said. We fixed the foundation. What they build on it is up to them. Across the street, Elise helped a young couple set up cornhole boards. Marjorie was handing out homemade ice cream sandwiches. Someone had brought a speaker, but this time the only thing it played was Motown. No noise complaints. No fines. Just neighbors, finally free from the grip of a system that had turned power into control. As the sun dipped low, I looked around at the people who'd stood up, spoken out, and refused to be bullied, not heroes. Just homeowners who'd had enough, and this time the cameras weren't needed. Everyone was watching now and no one was afraid anymore.